Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast, Oh My God-zilla. I'm your host, Kira, and I have a special guest on the podcast today.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia, a media studies grad.
Nice to have you. I know I bothered you and I took you for a whole 8-hour journey watching 4 different Godzilla movies.
Yes, it was amazing.
Yes, we watched Godzilla 1954, Shin Godzilla 2016. Those are both the Japanese ones. Then we watched Godzilla the 2014 version and Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. Those are both the American versions. So in this episode, we will be covering more of the evolution of Godzilla throughout these films and what he might mean as a nuclear power and also other themes that were presented within the films themselves. Okay, so the first movie that we will be getting into is Godzilla, the 1954 version. This is the first Godzilla movie made in Japan, directed by Ishiro Honda. This movie was a very impactful movie at the time because in 1954 there was still some American occupation over Japan, and so things that they could address in film were very limited. And because of the extremely sensitive topic of both bombings, this was a very, very impactful movie to Japanese citizens.
Yeah, I was not aware that there was still occupation when that movie came out. That definitely changes the view of seeing the movie a little bit more.
Yeah, they had to be really careful about what they could say in the films. And also a year or two before this, they were even still doing H-bomb testing in the oceans near Japan, which is something that I will get into when we talk about this movie, because the 1954 film starts out with, do you remember the boat, the fishing boats?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the movie starts out with some fishing boats near the Odo Island that was in the film. And these boats were sunk by what you would say it looked like strange bubbling in the water, kind of like random lights. Most of the people on the crew did not survive. However, one of the boats that had went out, one lone survivor came back. And he had talked about him seeing a monster, which then was later to be revealed as Godzilla. These boating accidents where these people had died, this was relating back to when the U.S. was doing more H-bomb testing near Japan at the time. So the boating accidents that happened in real life that impacted real people from these H-bomb testings, this also related back to the movie. The director, Ishiro Honda, really wanted to put in the beginning scene because there was a really large outcry after this one specific accident happened, and the U.S. was testing one of their largest H-bombs, and it irradiated 23 crew members of the Lucky Dragon fishing boat.
Wow, I knew that opening was based on real events. I didn't know how much it was based on real events, though.
Mm-hmm. At the time, a lot of people in Japan started, yelling at the government because they were like, can you please stop doing bomb testing?
Fair enough.
We suffered enough. Yeah, so he really wanted to put that in because that was so close to when he even started the movie in the first place. But this also, the H-bomb testing then relates back to how Godzilla even came to be in the first film.
Our beloved radiation monster.
Yes. So a bunch of the H-bomb testings in the first film actually caused Godzilla to come out of his underwater sanctuary and just wreak havoc all over Japan because he was angry.
Fair enough.
And also very irradiated. He was a very nuclear monster. And so, he attacks Odo Island. And there's some debates in the film of how to deal with him, what they want to do with Godzilla. They had a lot of fights between whether or not, we should continue to study him, or we should kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, that is a argument that comes up, I believe, in all the movies.
Yeah, definitely all of the movies. They also had specific debates of whether or not they should tell the public, when they should tell the public, how.
It's like, I'm pretty sure, at least in the first movie, the public knew pretty quick.
The public did know pretty quick. Except at the time it was happening on Odo Island, and that was a little separated from the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a little bit of time before public figured out what was going on. But then at some point they didn't have any control over whether or not the public knew because they, Godzilla was huge, and people could see him.
Yeah, and in the later movies, it shows a lot more discussion of, you know, modern government and how they try to deal with the situation and what the public should know and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when Godzilla is in other areas of the world.
Yeah, and the debate also, when I was looking into more historical context, related back to how when the U.S. was planning to drop these bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they didn't debate whether or not to do it. They just debated where and when.
Yeah.
Not even if nuclear weapons should be used.
Yeah, there was very little debate. It was like, this is happening.
Yeah, the president gave the orders to just
do it.
Just do it. Just when and where. Also, in this first film, Godzilla is the only antagonist.
Right. Which is an interesting contrast to the other films, or some of the other films.
Yes. 2 out of the 4 films, Godzilla is the sole antagonist that is wreaking havoc on just Japan.
And interestingly enough, the 2 movies where he's the only antagonist are the ones that are out of Japan, the Japanese movies, as opposed to the US-based movies.
Yes.
Which there's always at least one other monster involved.
Yes.
And all an interesting point.
Mm-hmm. And all of the fight scenes, all of the destruction is mainly happening in the US. Godzilla being the lone antagonist really shows that what they were trying to come across was that nuclear power is not good. Because it was basically just a recreation to some level of what they experienced during Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, it takes even though it is obviously a fictional monster. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that, but
oh, he's out there.
Cryptid? No, even though Godzilla is a fictional monster in the Japanese movies, it is very obvious that he is a metaphor for nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. While the US-based movies are definitely distanced from that by having other monsters and a bigger storyline.
Yeah.
And stuff, while the Japanese movies are very much like, this is a radiation monster. What could that mean?
Right. We saw a lot of scenes of Godzilla setting buildings on fire, stomping over everything, women and children running around trying to find places to seek shelter, which very similar to accounts of what people had said happened in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. Also, in the first film, there was a very important character by the name of Dr. Serizawa. Mm-hmm. Dr. Serizawa in this film created a weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer. Now, this weapon, when he showed one of the other main characters, her name is Emiko, she was extremely frightened because it was on some level as to what nuclear power holds in terms of destruction. This specific type of weapon takes the air out of surrounding areas, and it's usually used in water. Mm-hmm. Any surrounding organism that is alive and is breathing, it is instantaneously killed and just turned into a skeleton.
It literally destroys all the oxygen.
Yes.
It is definitely a weapon of mass destruction. And even though he created it, Dr. Serizawa didn't want it to ever be used in any situation.
No, and he understood that. His character in the film completely understood that if this got out, and if people knew about it, if the government knew about it, they would make him create another one. And he didn't want to think about the ramifications of what would happen.
Or even if they knew it existed, they would figure out how to make it themselves after knowing it's possible.
Yes. So when they did their final attack on Godzilla in the first film, they went under the water, him and another character in the film, and they set up the oxygen destroyer, but Dr. Serizawa decided that he would take his own life in the process, dying alongside Godzilla, because he did not want his creation of the oxygen destroyer to ever be used again, or for anybody to know how to even try to replicate it and create it. He destroyed all of his plans for how he even made it in the first place, burning them all.
Which if you read really far into it, some may say that burning the plans is also another metaphor.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, he made it so that technology would never be found unless someone else, fully originally came up with it again. Mm-hmm. Which we do see happen in the later movies.
But this ending of Dr. Serizawa taking his own life just to ensure that this weapon would not be used ever again just hardcore relates back to Japan's newfound view that nuclear weapons are awful and should not be used in any circumstance, and that there are better ways to go about conflict management. When it was released in Japan, the Japanese civilians were absolutely terrified because this was basically them kind of almost reliving what had happened. But when it was released into like Western audiences, America specifically, it was changed quite a bit.
Yes, there's a reason that the original movie that we watched was called the uncut Japanese version of it, meaning there is another version of it.
Yes, and that version includes a spliced-in white American reporter who is, reporting on everything that's happening at the time, while a lot of very sensitive things were cut out of the original Japanese film. There's a very specific example of when Japanese commuters were on a train, and this woman kind of talks about how she's irritated that things were happening, specifically with Godzilla, and that people had to evacuate, and that she said, I've already lived through Nagasaki, like, what is this again?
Yeah, like, wow, I really have to do this again, and wow, the first time was awful. God forbid that U.S. citizens know that.
Right. Those were definitely cut out of the American version, and the reception of this film in American audiences was more of like a, ooh, big monster, do big squish.
Yeah, it was more of a monster action movie and not the horrifying metaphorical account of what happened in real life.
Yes, it wasn't really seen like that, but to any Japanese person, it was a very terrifying re-experience of what had happened to them. So moving along in chronological order, we have Godzilla 2014 version. This was made in the US. So it's a bit different than our first Godzilla 1954. Also, we have a fairly large time jump as well.
Yeah, 2014 is quite a bit of ways from 1954.
Definitely. So this film is also very different because our main stars are all white Americans.
Crazy.
Wow.
Shocking.
So this film starts out with a family living in Japan. The wife, Sandra Ford, and husband, Joe Ford, both work for a nuclear power plant in Japan. And so this power plant is undergoing some strange occurrences. There's a lot of weird things happening. And so the husband is rushing to work. Like, he has got these weird seismic readings that he's like, what are these? I don't know. It looks weird, though. And then stuff goes down. His wife ultimately passes away in this nuclear power plant along with a multitude of other people.
Most of the staff, yes.
Most of the staff. And a lot of the neighboring civilians had to be evacuated away from the area. So at 15 years after this, Brody, the son of Joe and Sandra, comes back. He's an Navy EOD specialist. And he's back home with his family for a majority of a day when he gets a phone call that is telling him that his father has been arrested in Japan. And so he needs to fly his booty back over to Japan. Yes. And when he gets there, he finds out his father has been still investigating the events of what happened at the power plant, saying that he's been receiving the same readings that he did 15 years ago, and he knows something's about to happen. They need to go reinvestigate it.
Yeah, people think this man is crazy. Spoiler alert, he's right.
Whoa, the mad scientist is actually right.
Shocking spoiler for a movie about Godzilla, but he's right.
So they go to this power plant, right? And they thought it would be like very radiation-y, but they saw some dogs running around it, and so Brody's father decides to take off his mask, and Brody's like, hey, yo, what the frick? But there's no radiation.
Which is suspicious, considering that to most people this was a reactor meltdown or something.
Yes.
When it was not. If the entire area is radiation-free, then something else is happening.
Some stuff's going down. They just happened to get arrested right after going back to their old home and picking up the old readings from 15 years ago. And they were taken to this newly built base where it looks like they're doing research on something. And the thing that you can see, it doesn't look like anything that we could recognize. Looks very futuristic-y, almost like Alien from the Alien movie.
Yeah.
in some way.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah. Again, so very alien in terms of what we are seeing. And it's kind of lighting up. You can see like pulsing and stuff. And they're getting interrogated in this interrogation room. And Brody's dad, Joe, he's going off. He's like, I know what happened 15 years ago. Like, what the frig? People need to know. Stuff is going to happen today, right now, if you don't do something about it.
Yeah, at first the staff here is like, get this crazy man out of here and
Right.
get him arrested.
Right.
But a couple of the staff realize, like, he knows what's happening here.
Mhm.
And he might be the only person who can really help know what's going on.
But by the time they kind of even get an inkling that the man
It's
is
a little
right,
too late.
it's a little too late, because whatever is like chilling in the middle of this research facility decides it's time to wake up and hatch.
Plot twist, not Godzilla.
Unfortunately, not Godzilla.
Not my one and only.
Not my one and only god.
Zilla.
But what hatches ultimately ends up being called a muto, which is a massive unidentified terrestrial organism. It doesn't stay terrestrial for long because it has wings and it starts to fly. And it looks honestly super like sci-fi-y, almost like it has like weird spaces where like you can see the energy like pulsing through it, the nuclear energy.
Yes, which is very similar to in the Godzilla movies, how his like spikes will glow and stuff to emit energy and lasers and shit.
Yes.
It's a kind of a similar look, meaning that they're somewhat similar.
Yes. And another similarity between them is we find out during this film that the Mutos feed on nuclear power and like radiation. So they end up flying to different locations across the globe in order, like the closest one nearest to where they had hatched. So from Japan, that was then Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process of the first Muto hatching, Ford's father, Joe, passes away.
Yes.
And one of the researchers at this plant, named Dr. Serizawa.
Interesting. It's almost like we've heard that name before.
He's not the same Dr. Serizawa as in the 1954 film.
No, very different character.
Very different character. Was not around in 1954.
Yes, it is a different character by the same name.
Yes.
Based off of the original Dr. Serizawa.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not meant to be the same guy.
Yes. This Dr. Serizawa is part of an organization called Monarch, and they are researching these specific creatures, trying to figure out what they are, what they're doing, and just making sure that they aren't going to, destroy humanity.
That would be good.
Yeah, but they're not really that successful at all, actually.
No, by the end of the 2019 one, lots of things are destroyed.
Lots of things are destroyed. But this Dr. Serizawa asks Brody for help because his father passed away. And so they just asked him,
What do you know?
What do you know? And all Brody can really come up with was that he remembers his father saying that they were communicating with each other, that these seismic frequencies sounded like that they were talking. And Dr. Serizawa was like, oh shit.
Yeah, think about like whales.
Yeah.
Talking, but instead of, it's just the sound waves and not the actual sound.
Yeah, you can't like hear them physically like screaming across each other like birds. They're
Imagine Godzilla just like screeching.
I mean, he does screech.
Yeah, but as a form to just like having a normal conversation with another Muto, he's just like
ah. Yeah, no, but the Muto is talking, and it's talking to another Muto. So they find that out again a little too late, because where they stored what they thought was a dormant Muto was near all of their other radiation stuff. So this Muto then hatches because it heard, the other Muto talking and hatching. And so the second one that hatches is a female.
Yes. So if one's a female and one's a male, you can guess that they're going to try to find each other.
The first Muto goes and fricks up stuff in Hawaii, and Brody ends up eating Hawaii as well because he's trying to get back to San Francisco to save his wife and kid.
Yes. That just is kind of a side plot almost.
Yeah, that doesn't matter at all. Not really. Not at all. But yeah, on his way to try to get back to San Francisco, he ends up in Hawaii. The first Muto, the male Muto, is also in Hawaii, eating things.
Destroying things, yes.
Eating things, destroying things, trying to find nuclear power, and also meet up at a waypoint with its female counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. When they finally meet up, it's in San Francisco. where Brody's family is. Wow.
Shocking.
So one of the ways that they thought that they could destroy these monsters, they also wanted to destroy Godzilla in the process. Because Godzilla is a big part of this because the movie is called Godzilla. Whoa. Godzilla.
Even though he only has, what did we count, 20 minutes of screen time?
Yeah, Godzilla is not in this movie for a very long time, not fully shown. We can see him maneuvering the waters very skillfully. Good swimmer.
But he is very essential to the plot, even though we don't
Yes.
see him a lot in this movie.
And he's very interesting in this film because there are antagonist monsters. Godzilla ends up being like a restorative balance type in the environment. He ends up being what I would consider, when people talk about nuclear warfare and weaponry, like Godzilla ends up being what I think people would associate Godzilla to be, like good people using nuclear power for good things.
Yes, if you believe that's possible.
Which I don't think so.
But yeah, in this movie, Godzilla is more or less an ally
Yes.
to the people trying to stop these other giant Mutos
Mm-hmm.
by using him as a defense mechanism.
Yeah. They did want to also blow him up because they were like, what?
Well, their goal, they thought that, if Godzilla can destroy these other creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and then we destroy Godzilla,
Yeah, but
all of our problems are solved.
yeah, if he dies in the process, whatever.
That's cool.
Yeah, but they
Plot twist.
initially
He
they
doesn't.
want yeah no he doesn't. They initially wanted to end goal have all of them dead because that was
Fair.
too terrifying of a threat with humanity that they were like, oh, these people gotta go. But Godzilla ends up helping out big time fighting these Mutos. Very similar consequences of these fights happen in San Francisco and other places that these Mutos destroyed. Lots of firestorms happening because obviously Godzilla is absolutely screaming out radiation from his mouth.
Yes, he's essentially a giant laser
Yes.
of fire and death. Just like he was in the first movie.
Right. Even though he's not just stomping around Tokyo Anki.
Yeah, he's a little bit more fleshed out as a character in this movie than just it's almost like in 1954 he was more of almost a natural force, like a natural disaster, versus in this movie he's more of like almost a character
Yeah.
than anything else.
He's trying to stop the Mutos from doing stuff because they're often called parasitic in the films. So this kind of means that they aren't really supposed to be there. They're not supposed to be doing what they're doing. So Godzilla, as the king he is, rises up and fights the Mutos because he's like, nah.
But the king that he is, he
The king that he
destroys things.
Yes. Dr. Serizawa in this film says Godzilla is basically here to restore balance, that the Mutos aren't really supposed to be doing what they're doing. And he also gives a very sentimental recount of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings. He pulls out a pocket watch out of his pocket, and it's stopped at a very specific time, 8:15 a.m. And he talks about the Hiroshima bombing. Yes. And kind of talks about how, nuclear war ain't great.
The very, very simplistic, broad message of these movies is nuclear war, bad.
But Godzilla ends up defeating both of the Mutos. Along with help from the U.S. military, they are a very prevalent, overarching character in this film as well. They do a lot of things.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of, like most big action movies out of the U.S., it is military propaganda.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And so you can see a lot of the U.S. military personnel running around trying to figure out how to, fight Godzilla. They end up, uselessly shooting him in the Mutos, and it does absolutely nothing because, pew-pew little guns don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But Brody finds that he blows up all of the little parasitic eggs that the female Muto lays in downtown San Francisco, which oddly enough looked like it was in Chinatown in San Francisco.
Yeah, it was really interesting the fact that they chose to add the detail of making it look like it was in Chinatown with the red paper lanterns and things.
Yes.
It's just a very interesting choice because that could have been any major street in San Francisco, and they chose deliberately to make it look like Chinatown.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting choice.
Very interesting choice. So they end up, blowing up the little baby parasitic eggs. And then Godzilla in the end ends up killing the female Muto as well. And then he valiantly passes out in the streets of San Francisco.
Yeah, he needs to take a little nappy nap.
Yeah, Godzilla needs to take a nap.
After a fight like that.
Yeah.
He's just got to rest.
Godzilla low-key got his butt whooped a little bit by the Mutos.
Oh, yeah, if you watch this movie not knowing there's a sequel, you may think that Godzilla's going to die.
Yeah. No, but he ends up waking up. And this was during civilians' efforts to uncover anybody lost in the debris of San Francisco, basically do damage control.
Yeah, the like post-event stuff is happening around,
yes.
And Godzilla's kind of just laying there for a bit.
Yeah. But he ends up waking up, and he just gets up, walks straight up out of San Francisco, and just
back into the ocean.
Back in the ocean, swims to wherever he was chilling before the Mutos hatched. Yep. And a very interesting television screen that popped up where a bunch of survivors were staying in a big stadium in San Francisco. It basically, it said, Godzilla, savior of our city.
Yeah, so at this point in these, like, the two U.S. movies, Godzilla is an ally at this point. He did not have any motive to continue to destroy anything human-related. He just destroyed the Mutos, got up, left, went back to whatever undersea cave he lives in.
Yeah, and obviously during this time when he is trying to destroy the Mutos, there's going to be some collateral damage on his part. There are going to be buildings that are knocked over. His nuclear blasts to, hit the Mutos are obviously going to cause some damage, cause some fallout.
But I mean, hey, look at every single, like, superhero movie and the amount they destroy New York every single time.
I'm not surprised there isn't some, like, in, the Avengers movies, that there isn't just, like, an Avengers insurance package somewhere.
You would think, right?
Yeah, like, oh shit, Iron Man chucked my car.
But I would rather have a city destroyed and the Mutos destroyed than a city destroyed and the Mutos still alive, killing a bunch of other things.
Yes.
So overall win.
Overall win. That is a very interesting point, though, when you think of, like, this is for the greater good. Because Godzilla, again, it does seem like it's nuclear weapon being used for good, for the saving of humanity and not the destroying of humanity. And the Mutos are almost like the bad nuclear weapons, which could be very...
Which is interesting because it goes back to how in the original Japanese movie, he's a natural disaster of nuclear energy.
Yes.
And it is pretty straightforward. Nuclear weapons bad. In the US version, obviously, which is full of military propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
Is more of like there is definitely a debate between whether or not nuclear weapons are good or bad, which is just a very interesting take because obviously the US thinks nuclear weapons are better than Japan would think.
But yeah, the US hasn't suffered from any atomic bombs by another country. We did go through a Cold War in which we were very close to either being bombed or bombing another country.
Yeah, and there was obviously fear and not gonna disregard the fact that US citizens were living in eternal fear of nuclear war, but so was everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, there is also some military propaganda in the first 1954 film as well. We have a whole sequence of military vehicles and aircraft being sent out by the Japanese military. And there is a very earwormy song that plays over the top of this footage happening. And this song also makes an appearance in the 2014 film as well.
But yes, they definitely use a lot from the original movie in the US ones, which I do have a lot of respect for, and that is shown quite a bit more in the 2019 one than the 2014 one.
Yeah, 2014 takes they take a little bit. They obviously Dr. Serizawa appears, and that's a very integral character in the 1954 film. The music, the imagery of Godzilla as well. He looks somewhat similar to the OG Godzilla. However, he is a bit bigger. He's also a bit more limber, flexible.
Yeah, he's significantly bigger in the US one. Also, yeah, the overall vision and like look and, you know, fire breathing and all of that is definitely taken from the original. You know, it's got to be recognizable as Godzilla.
Yeah. But when I was watching, I could tell the difference between the 2014 and the 2016 one, because Godzilla in the 2014 version did not look scary.
No, he was more of he was almost just like a big dinosaur.
Yeah.
Versus, I think in the way that he's shown in other movies is like very scary. Or at least scary for the time.
Yeah, there's a weird kind of aura around him that, like, even though in the 1954 film they're using a man in a suit stomping around miniatures.
Yeah, practical effects, because 1954.
Yeah, they could only do so much with what they had and what they wanted to do. But even though the man in the suit looked a little silly at times, but we're going to look past that because it's not what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
But
and obviously to us living in 2023,
yeah, we've seen
practical effects are gonna look silly.
Yeah,
but if that's all you've seen, to see that on a screen must have been insane in 1954.
Yeah. And they did the practical effects very well.
Yeah, love practical effects.
Yeah, so good. But even though the man was in this Godzilla suit that like couldn't really change much in terms of the emotion of Godzilla that he was showing, he still seemed like angry and scary. Like, I feel like if I was watching that and I was younger, I would be scared of Godzilla. But the 2014 version, he seemed a bit more
almost friendly.
Yeah, like I would go up and snoop boop Godzilla in the 2014 version.
Yeah, I think it's also because of the fact that in 2014 he's portrayed much more as an ally force and as someone that is helping us. He just seems a lot less scary.
Yeah. We get a very intimate scene in the 2014 film with Brody and Godzilla staring each other down in the streets of this like very dusty, foggy San Francisco that's been like fairly destroyed, and him and Godzilla just look at each other for a little bit.
He easily could have just destroyed Brody right then and there.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's when he just turns around, walks away.
Yeah. Almost like a knowing, like, we're both here for the same reason.
Yeah, there was like a really interesting like connection that is shown there between like human and Godzilla. And like to really like reiterate the fact that like he's not here to just like destroy humanity. And then he just walks off.
So it is a very interesting way that evolution between 1954 to 2014, how they viewed Godzilla as more of like a friendly ally who's still very destructive, and they understand that
he's powerful, and if he uses the power against us, like, he will win.
Oh yeah,
but
hands down.
As of right now, he's choosing not to.
They're saying he's a good force, even though what he is, himself being like nuclear power is still very terrifying, and you know.
Which then, of course, just leads farther into the debate of nuclear weapons as a whole.
Yes. But that moment where Brody is staring down Godzilla and Godzilla is staring down Brody is a very impactful moment. You almost felt like you were Brody in that moment because you're so tiny. The way that the camera was panned more to the ground and you're looking up at Godzilla and Godzilla's just towering above you.
Yeah, that was a very impactful shot.
Yes. Okay, so the next movie we're going to be talking about, still moving chronologically, is the Japanese film Shin Godzilla, which was made in 2016.
This movie? Whack.
Yeah, whack indeed. It doesn't really follow what we've been talking about in terms of, like, more centered, because it is still centered on nuclear power, but it's more about government political criticism, which is still a big thing when talking about when we're using nuclear power as a whole, and like what to do and like who's in charge and who's making those decisions. But this is a very different film, and it is not connected in any way to the 2014 version or the 2019 version, and in some retrospect the 1954 film as well.
Yeah, it's definitely more of a commentary on the government. It's set up like a mockumentary for some of it.
Yeah, they're when looking at trailers of this film before even deciding whether or not I wanted to add this into the podcast, it almost looked like a found footage film because there were scenes where there was civilians using their phone cameras running away from the destruction that Godzilla was, having.
Yeah, it started like that. I really wish it had more found footage vibe in it. It kind of went away from that, but
it did. It was very focused on inside the political turmoil of them trying to figure out what the heck to do with Godzilla, but they can't get their gears rolling enough to even try to figure out what to do.
Yeah, it was very centered on how inefficient most governments are. Really going with the idea of we can't make a decision until we figure out who is the right person to make the decision, and we can't figure that out until we can't figure that out, and we can't figure that out.
Yeah.
Kind of, the chain of command thing, and how making decisions within a government body is very inefficient.
Yeah.
And unproductive.
And couple that with the terms of some disaster is going on right now and it is having immediate impact on the people in your country.
You need to take action and say something and do something now. But the movie very clearly shows us that is not what's happening.
No, it's the opposite, in fact. And the Prime Minister of Japan in this film has no autonomy, really. He just kind of decides to do whatever someone just tells him to do.
Yeah, they're like, here's what we think should happen. Here's option 1 and option 2. Pick one. And then, he just has to pick one.
Yeah,
or sometimes he's only given one option, and he just has to give them the go-ahead.
Because sometimes he gets the couple of options, he's like, I don't really know what to do. And then someone just kind of says more a leaning indication of to do one of the two, and he goes, we'll do it. Mm-hmm. There was a whole debate of what to even call Godzilla.
And that took so long.
So
while Godzilla was destroying their city.
Godzilla in this film.
Yeah, the Godzilla in this film looks very different than the other Godzillas do physically.
Godzilla in this film, it was a very interesting take on Godzilla, and I appreciated it. Mm-hmm. He had evolutionary forms, like a Pokemon.
Yeah, so in the beginning of the movie, he was in Form 1, and it went through 4 different forms until the end of the movie when it looked... By Form 4, he looked closer to what most people would envision Godzilla looking like.
Yes.
But it took a little while to get him there.
And was a very odd transitional evolutions that he went through.
Yeah, they made it sound like how it worked was as he encountered different obstacles, like wanting to move from sea to land and things like that, was able to evolve very quickly to adapt, like how regular evolution works, but just on an insanely fast scale.
Yeah, he wanted his second evolutionary form, because the first form we don't really see too much of, other than his
tail,
his really weird tail sticking out of the water, and a bunch of blood pooling around him in the water.
He bleeds a lot.
He does bleed quite a bit.
It's weird.
His second evolutionary form, when he comes out, he's kind of almost in this weird kind of I don't know how to explain, the salamander-y?
Yeah, he's in this kind of in-between state between a sea creature and a land creature.
Yeah.
And he doesn't quite have the physical form to move efficiently on land yet, but he has the ability to survive on land. So he does do he kind of looks like a weird wiggly lizard guy.
Yeah, and his gills are very floppy, and they exude a lot of blood. He'll just drop gallons and gallons of blood.
Yep, it's weird.
It is so weird. At some point in the film, when he's in this form, he kind of just stops and flops on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can't tell, this is definitely the odd one out of the movies, which is why there was a debate of whether or not to even include this one.
Yeah.
But I think all of the aspects of evolution and his power, and then the government aspect, makes it important.
It becomes more important later in the film, when he finally gets into his last 2 evolutionary forms. He looks more like the traditional Godzilla, and I want to say kind of more like the original Godzilla. The original Godzilla, he had very tiny upper arms.
Yeah, very T-Rex like.
And he wasn't very mobile, and that was very similar to in the 2016 film, his final form.
Mm-hmm.
He was not very flexible. I kept telling Julia when we were watching the film, he looked like a charred marshmallow.
Yeah, like his skin looked hard and crunchy, but gooey at the same time.
Yeah, like
it's very uncomfortable.
Almost like the Mutos in the 2014 film, you could see him glowing from within, like the
he does do that still.
Yeah, you could see the radiation, the power within him.
So and there's still like lasers and fire breathing and all of that.
Yes.
Great stuff that Godzilla has.
The Godzilla in this film was extremely, I want to say, like overpowered compared to the last two that we examined.
Yeah.
He had a lot going on.
The fact that they took him down was almost like more unrealistic than in the other ones because of how overpowered he was. Yeah, like in the 1954 film, they used the oxygen destroyer, which made sense because he was a living, breathing organism. Yep.
And so he was able to be, destroyed because, no oxygen means like, oh,
you're dead.
This one, they found that the only ways that they could really kill him were either to nuke him with a nuke that was 80 times stronger than the ones used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or because, you don't want to nuke the entirety of, like, Japan.
Yeah, that's a big debate in this one of, do we essentially, like, do that to ourselves?
Yeah.
Or is there another way to go about it?
And the other way was found by a group of volunteer people that one politician who decided that every other politician sucked butt.
And he was right.
He was right. So he decided to make his own little group. And they were kind of... it almost seemed like a big group of conspiracy theorists just coming up trying to, like, figure out what to do. But they ended up being right.
They ended up freezing Godzilla from within.
Yeah, they found that they could coagulate his blood. And that they could freeze him from within. He ended up kind of being almost like Anno in the first Frozen movie where he just kind of froze there.
Yeah, kind of just an ice statue.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie ends, is they defeat him, but it's left with a lot of unknowns because he's just there frozen, and they don't, as a viewer, you don't get to know, like, what's the plan from here out.
Yeah, it was a big question mark for them, too. Some other background research I was looking up for when I was researching this movie more in depth, because I was also confused about kind of some of the underlying plot or even what was going on with Godzilla. Turns out that he could asexually reproduce.
Interesting.
Yeah, so...
Did not know that.
Yeah, we didn't really get that from when we were watching. Not really, like, straight out, or if we did, our brains were Godzilla mush at that point.
Yeah, this was the third movie.
This was the third movie into our 8-hour-long Godzilla marathon.
So, brain slightly mushy.
And also,
just the way that this Godzilla looked was so freaking weird, you guys.
Yeah, every time we saw a new evolutional form, we were like, what is that? Why does he look like that?
Why is he bleeding all over the place? Why is his skin so floppy? Why do his eyes look like dried pineapple rings?
He never blinked. They looked... Well, now that I think about it, it does kind of go back to the original film, because it was a suit. The suit never blinked at all either.
Yeah, but they don't, like, zoom up on it in color.
No, they don't. They don't.
2016.
They really
where
don't.
It's like, you obviously, like, this is 2016. The CGI tech to make it not look like this existed. We can tell by the fact that in the 2014 movies, the monsters looked great. The CGI was surprisingly good for 2014. And then there's just this Shin Godzilla movie where he just looks like this was the first time they were playing around with this kind of effect in 2008.
Yeah, the Godzilla's second evolutionary form, the texture that they put on his skin when he
gross.
was... God, I don't know what happened with that.
Borderline furry.
He looked furry. He looked like...
It was so wiggly.
It looked like seaweed in water when you touch it with your foot.
that is like that entire movie. Every time Godzilla was on screen, that was how I physically felt. Was my feet touching seaweed in a lake.
Oh.
That's how I felt the entire time, you guys.
Great analogy.
So this movie was just obviously the odd one out.
He destroyed, out of all of the Godzillas, even in the 2019 version, which we'll get into in a little bit, this Godzilla, I think, destroyed more of Japan or more in general than Godzilla did in 2014 and in 1954. But the 2014 one, we agreed that he was more of an allied, so it was more collateral damage. He didn't seem to be intentionally knocking down buildings. It was just kind of like
in 2016, like he was trying to destroy things. That was his only motivation. Yeah,
and since this film was another just Godzilla being a sole antagonist again, that meant that like obviously he was going to be the villain. He was going to be, you know, original kind of monster stomping around on cities trying to destroy things type of vibe.
To get out of just what he looked like and how weird of a movie it was, the most important part of this movie was the fact that they were debating nuking Japan to destroy Godzilla, a nuclear monster.
Yes.
Which probably would have just been a bad idea to begin with. There would seem to be very little logic to that. But more importantly, it was allies, like allied countries, that wanted to bomb Godzilla and get rid of him.
Yeah.
While Japan wanted a little bit more time, or at least the one good politician running the group of volunteers wanted more time to see if they could find another solution before just letting another country nuke Japan again.
Yeah, and the only way that they were able to do this was because the original prime minister in this film, he ended up dying during one of Godzilla's attacks.
Yeah, so that's the only reason that they got that buffer of being able to have time to figure out that they can scientifically freeze him instead of nuking Japan again.
And the new prime minister that they selected he was originally the minister of agriculture, I believe.
Yeah, he had no right to make decisions.
No, he didn't know what he was doing at all.
So basically, if you went up to him and was just like, this is a good idea, let's do this, he'd be like, yeah, okay, do it.
Another thing, though, was that, again, during more background research into this, Godzilla could wake up. They didn't know when he could. Coagulating his blood only did so much. They realized, though, that the fallout that Godzilla, you know, delivered unto Japan wasn't as bad. So, like, they were able to, like, start reconstructing Japan, and other allied nations, UN, were going to step in and help during this time. But they made a deal with those allied forces, this one politician, saying that if Godzilla ever wakes up again, because of how big of a threat he was in this film, how undefeatable he seemed, they were going to just straight up nuke Japan. And that was the deal that they had to make. So the end of the film really was, it was like Godzilla off in the distance, frozen in this, like, just odd pose.
Yeah.
And this politician is talking to someone about this deal that they made, and basically just a really big what if question of what happens when he wakes up. What happens if he wakes up?
Like, I think the goal would be to have more time to do more research and figure out how to destroy him before he wakes up.
Yes.
But if he wakes up, Japan is getting nuked.
Yep.
Like,
full stop.
So that's just how the movie ends, which is really interesting because this is the only movie where there really wasn't a real conclusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess 2014 kind of, but that's because there's a sequel. But this is the only one where there's really no conclusion. It's fully up in the air what is going to happen now.
Yeah. And 2014 had it was more positive spin on the ending. 2016, you felt very unnerved. It was very like, oh, now what? And one of the last things you saw in the 2016 film was Godzilla's tail had, like, skeletons, like humanoid skeletons popping out of it.
Yeah, like it was made, like, it was almost like his tail had, like, spikes made out of skeletons on it.
And because of the thing that said that he could reproduce, he could just multiply or whatever.
Yeah.
That made me think, like, okay, so, like, what does it look like when he multiplies? Are those the things that are multiplying off of him?
Yeah, and if his tail, because, like, it looked, at least to me, it looked like that end of the tail where we were seeing the bones and stuff looked not like the rest of him.
Yeah.
So it was maybe not frozen like the rest of him, which is scary.
Despite some of the kind of bad CGI that happened in the film, I think there were some really good moments where we could see just the destruction of what was going on around him.
Yeah, the actual visuals of destruction were up to par with what you would see in 2016.
Yeah.
It's just like the monster himself, whenever they did close-ups on him, it was just ugh.
Yeah. And this
my only description.
This film also really didn't talk like, it didn't show too much, like, civilian casualties. Unlike the 1954 film and the 2014 American film, that had a lot of, like, you know, civilians running for their lives and stuff.
Yeah, and, like, graphic people dying and all
Yes.
that stuff. Versus Shin Godzilla really... They never went close up to, like, casualties or anything.
Yeah, they had, in some instances, in the 2016 film, they had a lot of people evacuated from where Godzilla was.
So they would show, like, overhead shots of people fleeing and stuff, but it was never graphic in any way.
So in the 2016 film, Godzilla walked on land in his toasty marshmallow form, and a bunch of people were running for their lives because he just came straight up out of the sea. And so that was one of the only times that you saw people just start booking it. But again, like, the scenes of destruction, the actual firestorms that you saw, because 2014 didn't really have that much in terms of, like, fire happening. It was very muted down.
In 2014, it was definitely more just, like, physical destruction. Like,
Yes.
the fight that happened between Godzilla and the Mutos just had a lot of physical destruction because they, you know, giant monsters throwing each other around that are, like, the size of buildings. There's gonna be a lot of destruction. But there wasn't, like, as much of, like, the fire-breathing aspect.
And you could see that in the 1954 film. You could see a lot of
fire.
A lot of fire, which...
Mostly fire.
Related back to the firestorms that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the 2016 one, I felt almost really encapsulated what people who saw those events go down in Hiroshima and Nagasaki as just hell. It looked hellish. It looked like, you know, you went down to the deepest circle of hell, and that's kind of what it looked like. And I appreciated them for doing that, for not really holding back, because 2014 really muted it a bit, and you could see it in the 1954 film.
Once again, interesting.
Yes.
That Shin Godzilla, made in Japan, set in Japan, a lot more fire, a lot more destruction, all of that sort of stuff, versus in the US one, once again, toned down, which is an interesting point.
Yeah. It almost seems like, you know, the people in Japan understood what happened to them and were able to better recreate.
And it's almost like the US didn't want to make it seem like it was that bad.
Right. They were still almost not denying it, but...
They're really trying to double down on the fact that that was the right decision.
Right.
No matter what happened. And so trying to make it seem like it was less destructive and hellish than it was. But yeah, so Shin Godzilla, kind of weird, but had a lot of good points hidden beneath the weirdness.
Okay, so for our final film in this chronological order, we have Godzilla, King of the Monsters, 2019. This was also an American film. In this chronological order, we went back and forth from Japan, America, Japan, America.
So this one, just to clarify, is a direct sequel of the US 2014 one.
Yes, so it gets into a lot more themes that then really connect to the 1954 Japanese film.
The tiebacks are so good.
Oh my god, when we watched this.
So much respect.
Oh, I almost cried.
We went in, like, I went in really thinking that this was, especially being even newer in the US, like, 2019, that's, like, peak Marvel type action bullshit movies. I at least went in really expecting this to be just, you know, really good CGI, but just kind of a regular old action movie type thing, monster action movie. But then they started doing all of these, like, tiebacks and references to the 1954 film, and we were like, holy shit, they, like, did this real. They did this right.
Yeah, so 5 years after Godzilla versus the Mutos in San Francisco, after that event went down.
Yeah, Godzilla's just been chilling underwater doing his thing, not bothering anybody for that time.
Yep, Godzilla's chilling. However, the organization Monarch is under some very hot water with every government in existence, because they're like, what? When were you going to tell us that you were researching all of these monsters?
So now, in 2019, there is more Mutos, or what they are now calling Titans.
Yes.
Big monster guys. They're all different. And that's what Monarch is studying. They have a lot of them kind of captured in areas kind of similar to 2014 with the original Muto that hatched, like that facility.
Yes.
And they're researching them instead of just immediately destroying them. And the government is mad because they see that as a threat.
Yeah. And so Dr. Serizawa and his assistant are there, and they have to leave because some stuff's going down. this film is kind of also, it's still talking about nuclear power, but it's having a lot to do with the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And because right now, like, just gonna throw it out there and say it, climate change, it's happening.
Yeah, this movie definitely takes on less of an approach with, like, it's not a debate on nuclear war anymore. It's a debate on climate change and the fact that humans are killing the earth, and maybe the Titans can bring the balance back.
Yes.
Which is why they're studying them so intensely.
And there is a group of eco-terrorists that are, their plan is basically to just...
let them all free.
Yes.
Let them do their thing.
Right. And there's
some... bad idea.
We tie this back so many times to Avengers, but it is kind of giving Thanos vibes where he's like, the balance must be restored, kill half of the population, except this eco-terrorist group is basically...
letting the Mutos do it for them.
Yeah. They're like, nah, I mean, whoever survives, but like, we, you know, rebalance.
Not realizing that, wait, maybe there's like a controlled way to do this that isn't just destroying humanity.
Right.
Because their view is like, well, if humanity gets wiped out from this, then that's what's supposed to happen, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Is basically their view. When the rest of Monarch is like, no, don't do that. Maybe there's another way to go about this.
And so there's the eco-terrorist group. They were able to create this device that was originally just supposed to be a way to kind of communicate with sea creatures. They were able to create specific calls that could control or in certain ways like manipulate the Titans into doing specific things.
Yeah, so we discussed in 2014 how they can talk to each other.
Yes.
Kind of like, you know, whales and stuff. And so this device is recreating those same seismic pulses so that Mutos or Titans think that other Titans are trying to talk to them when really it's simulated by a technological device.
And the specific frequencies that they want these alpha frequencies. So they want to be able to control all of them because there is a hierarchy among the Titans. And so if you find this one specific alpha frequency, you can assert dominance over the other Titans. And so they, you know, don't kill you. And we see that happen in the first bit of the film where we see Mothra. We see them be able to control the Titan through this use of the alpha frequency when they find it. Then the eco-terrorist group busts in, takes the device and the scientist that made it and her daughter, and they're like hightailing it out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's very fuzzy at the beginning of whether or not the scientist who created it is on Monarch's side or the eco-terrorist side. Eventually learning that she is letting all of these creatures out.
It was her plan.
Yeah, so the scientist who created it is an eco-terrorist, or a part of that group.
Yeah, the scientist that created this her name in the film is Dr. Emma Russell. And her reasoning behind this, she had a very traumatic experience during the events 5 years prior. So in the 2014 film, during the San Francisco showdown between Godzilla and the Mutos, her family was living there at the time and they were trying to escape from whatever was happening. And their son, unfortunately, passed away.
Yes, a young child.
Yes, during those altercations. And so her husband, Mark, his way of coping with it was drinking and kind of becoming a bad father to his daughter.
Yeah, he was kind of a piece of shit for a while.
Yeah, just a bit.
He gets better, though.
He has a character arc. Emma decided that a really good way to cope with this was to
destroy humanity.
Become an eco-terrorist. And so she creates this, and she decides that she's going to start releasing the Titans one by one. But in doing so, she releases Monster Zero, which is Ghidorah. Ghidorah, we find out later in the film, is actually more of an alien, not exactly a Titan.
Not so much a Titan, and is not what they were expecting to release. Yeah,
Ghidorah has a lot of power and influence over the other Titans. So when this happens, Ghidorah basically just was able to then unleash all the other Titans with the help of this seismic box that they had talked to the Titans. And so Ghidorah kind of took control, was able to control the rest of them. Godzilla and Mothra are basically our good are good Titans. They're the allies in this story as well.
Yes, Godzilla is still an ally here.
So Ghidorah is unleashed. Dr. Serizawa's assistant, who's been with us since the 2014 film, unfortunately gets McEaten by Ghidorah.
Yeah, she gets killed. It's very sad.
It is very sad.
Dr. Serizawa was very upset about it.
Yes, she's been with Dr. Serizawa for a very long time. This film then kind of follows them trying to help Godzilla fight Ghidorah and the other Titans that were unleashed. So Rodan is this firebird that just flies straight up out of this volcano.
Very Phoenix-like.
So there is an initial showdown where Godzilla ends up fighting both Ghidorah and I think Rodan.
I think it was Rodan, yeah.
Yeah. Godzilla unfortunately gets his ass whooped.
Yeah, and then this is where we start to see way more tiebacks to the first movie.
Yes. In this initial confrontation between them, the U.S. government has the oxygen destroyer.
Yeah, and they're threatening to use it.
And they do. They use it. It doesn't work.
Shocking.
Wow.
Because at this point, we're dealing with something a lot more than a single Godzilla sitting in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with a lot more here. But yeah, so already they bring back the idea of the oxygen destroyer, not created by Dr. Serizawa this time, but created by the U.S. military.
Yes.
So slightly different, but they do still reference that, except it just doesn't work this time.
No, it doesn't work on any of them. It hurts Godzilla more. It doesn't kill him. And then has to go recharge underwater wherever he was.
Yeah, in his cave.
Yes. So they were able to track Godzilla down following radiation patterns, which they did in the original 1954 film as well when they then killed him with the oxygen destroyer in the first film.
Yeah.
So
this time they are trying to help Godzilla.
Yes.
And help him regain strength rather than kill him.
Yeah, because they realized that he was going down to recharge, but at the state he was, it's going to take years for him to even get to fighting level again. Mm-hmm. And they figured the only way that he was able to regain this power was to just feed him a bunch of nuclear energy.
Yeah, because as we remember, that is how they gain their power. Mm-hmm. So literally they're going to nuke him to save him.
Yes.
Except there's a very particular way that has to be done, which involves Dr. Serizawa again.
Yes. So if y'all remember when we talked about the 1954 film, Dr. Serizawa, when he went to go use the oxygen destroyer on Godzilla, he went down and he ended up taking his own life because he didn't want that weapon to be used ever again. Mm-hmm. In this film, Dr. Serizawa did a solo mission bringing the nuclear weapon to Godzilla in this underwater cavern, which it seemed like a place before time.
Yeah, it was almost Atlantis.
Almost Atlantis-like.
And there were, inscriptions in the stone underwater of Godzilla. Yes. And stuff, and he was in this cave where there was so much radiation and heat down there that to get a nuke down there,
he was not going to survive the way back.
This was a suicide mission.
Yeah, he knew going into it that even if he did make it out before the blast, was highly unlikely that was not going to happen.
The radiation would kill him anyways.
Yes. And so it was this extremely impactful moment. You saw Dr. Serizawa carrying this nuclear missile. It's a smaller one, so he was able to carry it up a ton of these stairs and then up to where Godzilla was taking a snooze, regaining energy.
Yep. So he's in a dry cave underwater. So he has to drive the missile through the water in a little, underwater submarine thing to bring Godzilla food, basically.
Yeah, and Godzilla's laying there. Dr. Serizawa, he's in this almost, scuba diving suit. Mm-hmm. He takes off the helmet. He sets the missile down near Godzilla, and he turns it on, and he walks up to him, and it's just so impactful moment. It almost made me cry, honestly.
Yeah.
He looks at Godzilla, and he touches Godzilla on the nose, so Snoop Boops Godzilla for all of us. Mm-hmm. And he says in Japanese, goodbye, old friend.
Yeah. And if you kind of remember based on what we've been talking about, Dr. Serizawa has been studying since, 2014, has been studying this creature and has built such a connection with it and has always considered it an ally.
Yes, he is the only one that really seemed to believe that Godzilla was good.
He had the biggest connection, both scientifically and emotionally, to Godzilla as a creature. So for him to be the one to go down there and sacrifice himself is just such a big moment. Plus, his last moment being seeing Godzilla in person and being able to, like, physically touch Godzilla. It's like, you really couldn't ask for a better way for that guy to, to be at the end of his life. Yeah. Because that is, like, the accumulation of everything he's, like, worked towards, essentially.
It's very different from his Dr. Serizawa's character in the 1954 film, where he, like, kind of didn't have a connection with Godzilla. His connection was basically just killing him in the first film.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see that overarching of, like, his character then saving Godzilla.
Yeah. Such an interesting, like, juxtaposition tie back.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, there's even more parallels with, like, he has to go underwater to bring the destructive machine to Godzilla and stuff like that. It's such a good, like, respectful tie back to the first movie.
Yeah.
They're really like, it feels like the directors are really showing us that they know their shit about, like, the lore.
Yeah.
But also that they, like, respect the original movie. And they're building off of it.
Yeah. It was such a very, again, like you said, respectful way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, obviously, then the blast happens and, you know, no more Dr. Serizawa's, no more in the rest of the film.
But Godzilla, is hella strong now. And now is strong enough to go back and take on these other monsters.
Also, another thematic thing that appeared in this film that has appeared in all the rest of them, the song, the military propaganda song of Japan, was happening throughout this film.
The orchestral song, but they use that again in, like, the battle scene, which is just, especially watching them back to back like we did. Most watchers, 99.9% of people who have seen that movie probably haven't seen the first one. So it's like, the fact that the tiebacks fit so seamlessly into the movie, whether you know about them or not, is impressive, for one. But two, just the fact that even though the directors know that the majority of people have not seen it, they still choose to even pull the soundtrack from the original one and use it again. Yeah. Like, mad respect.
They do change it a little bit.
A little bit, but it's the same vibe.
Yes, it's still very similar. Like, you can definitely hear it.
Especially, like I said, watching it back to back, the parallels were so much more obvious because we were able to watch them within hours of each other.
So Godzilla is supercharged.
Mm-hmm.
And he is ready to take on literally anything that even, like, looks at him wrong.
Literally.
But the consequence of that is the bomb that Serizawa delivered to him is a little too strong for Godzilla. Godzilla, if he uses too much of his power, will just implode, and he will be his own nuke. He
won't implode, he'll explode.
Well, yeah.
Because he will, it is like he himself is now a giant nuclear bomb.
He is.
And if he uses too much energy, he will just self-explode.
And it is going to destroy more
than anything.
Yes. And so...
luckily that doesn't happen.
Yeah, luckily that doesn't happen. And the reason why that doesn't happen is Mothra. Mothra comes back. She is able to help Godzilla during his final battle between Ghidorah and Rodan. Basically, like, kind of cools him down enough so that he doesn't explode.
So together they're able to fight.
Yeah, she sacrifices herself as well. She's not really seen after she does that because she lays herself over Godzilla and basically almost like
shields him,
and then a bunch of, like, gold glitter falls into Godzilla.
Yeah, there was something unnatural happening there.
Yeah.
But basically, in my mind, I see it as Mothra is physically shielding Godzilla, but also is at least, like, transferring some of her energy or all of her energy to Godzilla.
Yeah.
Just not, like, radioactive energy, like normal, just different spiritual energy almost.
Yeah.
That's how, like, that's usually portrayed, kind of.
At this point during this fight, it's happening in a baseball stadium, which is
the same stadium from the first. Not the same one, but there's, like, the stadium in the first one.
Yeah, everybody reconvenes in a San Francisco stadium.
After the 2014 one, and now they're in a stadium again.
Yeah, except this time there's no civilians there.
Yeah, it's just empty.
There's one. It's Emma Russell's daughter. Emma Russell's daughter stole the voice box that has the alpha frequency. Alpha frequency, by the way, is made up of the Titan frequency and human vocals because we were also technically in Alpha Predator.
Yes.
And so that's why they will submit and listen to it, which is a little odd considering that, like, humans can literally do, like, by themselves nothing to these creatures.
It's interesting that is how they decided to go with it, but whatever.
It does kind of make sense in Godzilla's terms because when we went into that underwater cave, when Serizawa went to underwater cave, we saw a bunch of these depictions of humans and Godzilla kind of, like, working together, working with, like, the
and
Titans.
Obviously humans probably were the ones to have built whatever this underwater city was at one point.
Yes, and this underwater city was basically for Godzilla. It was like
a monument to him.
Yeah, like a throne room almost.
Yeah.
So, like, it kind of
King
makes
of the monsters.
Right?
Makes sense.
Whoa.
Woo.
So it makes sense that it kind of makes sense in the end that, like, human vocals tied with more of, like, the Titan vocals creates the alpha
together.
Makes the alpha vocal.
But yeah, so the daughter is using the stadium sound system, which, as you can imagine, is very loud, to play the frequencies as loud as is possible.
Yeah, she initiates the final showdown between Ghidorah, Godzilla, and Rodan and Mothra. The other Titans that are roaming around right now are a little too far away to get there at the moment.
They're just kind of there.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones that are kind of hopping around. There's what looks to be like a woolly mammoth just kind of stomping around.
Yeah, that one's cool.
That one's cool. I wish we saw more of that.
Sequel? But yeah, so there's Mutos or Titans, whatever you want to call them, of all different kinds that kind of resemble other animals that, or at least we think resemble other animals because of what we know, and stuff like Mothra's a moth.
Whoa.
But a very pretty moth.
Yeah, no, there was definitely some other ones, but they weren't shown as much. They were vaguely shown when there was when the chaos of all the Titans being released.
Yeah, they were more just briefly shown to give the audience the idea that these are everywhere. Mm-hmm. And there are a ton of different kinds of them.
Yep, and that, stuff is going down all over the U.S. and the rest of the world, frankly. It's happening all over. So, like, it's imperative that Godzilla is able to take down Ghidorah, because Ghidorah is basically the one's thrown everything out of balance. And Godzilla, like we saw in the 2014 version, and what Dr. Serizawa said about him, he is the restorer of balance.
Yes, that is what Godzilla is at this point. Mm-hmm. And Ghidorah being not one of the Titans, really, kind of something
otherworldly.
Something bigger, something more powerful, is doing the opposite of what the eco-terrorist's goal was, and is just not restoring the balance.
Right.
But if Godzilla can take it down, then he would be the bringer of balance again.
At one point, Godzilla was able to tear off one of Ghidorah's heads. Ghidorah has 3 heads. It's like a 3-headed dragon with wings. Very, very cool.
Like, CGI and effects in this movie are really good.
Incredible.
Like, the monsters look amazing.
Oh yeah, for sure. You get sucked into it. Mm-hmm. Honestly, if you're just looking for
a good action monster movie,
this is the one for you.
Whether you've seen the uncut Japanese 1954 version or not.
Yeah.
You also don't even really need to have seen the 2014 one to watch the 2019 one. While it is a direct sequel, you can kind of get away. And we're not following the exact same people either, so they do give enough exposition. If you just want a really good action monster movie, you can watch the 2019
Yeah,
one.
Especially since our main characters are not the same as the 2014 film.
Yeah, we're following a different set of characters, so you can really get away with it.
But Godzilla was able, at some point before the final showdown, to tear off one of Ghidorah's heads. Mm-hmm. This becomes a little relevant later after the final, fight happens. But in the final fight, Emma Russell, shoos her daughter away, and gets her to the dad, and they're able to safely kind of fly off. But the mom uses that time to take the voice box and run with it to distract Ghidorah enough that Godzilla can then kind of get up again, because he got a little knocked out. He got knocked down during the fight. He is battling 2 other things at the moment.
Yeah, but the mom, Emma, decides to distract Ghidorah long enough where Godzilla can get back up and Mothra can come and all that good stuff.
Emma takes the thing. She's driving around the streets. One of her last final words before she gets absolutely nuked by Godzilla's. She gets destroyed. She goes, "Long live the king." And Ghidorah is leaning down right above her. But then Godzilla, like the boss he is, rises above Ghidorah in the back and absolutely just annihilates him.
Yep.
I mean, he does, gives off like the biggest nuclear blast that I think we've seen in the film so far.
Yes, but he wins. And all I care about is Godzilla at this point.
Yes. Ghidorah ends up dying. And then Godzilla, you know, is kind of like doing his like big macho man kind of like call. He's screaming. The screams sounded very much like the original screams in the 1954
that was another
film.
thing where it's like you could tell they pulled like a lot of inspiration from the original one with that.
Like you heard Godzilla like sound off a couple of times and you're like, yeah, this is it, baby.
Yeah.
Like, let's go. Except those original calls were scary. They were terrifying.
Yeah.
But now it's like a signal of like
strength.
He's back. He's stronger than ever. The end, it shows Godzilla basically getting kind of crowned king by the rest of the Titans that are there. A bunch of Titans are like kneeling before him.
Yeah, like he is the all power now.
He is the alpha. The film kind of ends like that with him being kind of crowned by these other Titans. You can see in like ending newspaper clippings during the final credits of the other Titans actually starting to rebalance the earth and the environment.
Yes, so now that Ghidorah is gone, the other Titans are doing what we hoped they would and restoring balance to the world.
Yes, now that there is an actual good power in power,
yeah.
Now they're doing good things. Before they were just rampaging, and now they're working with humans. Yeah, Godzilla really did what Dr. Serizawa kept telling everybody Godzilla would.
He was right. He was right all along.
He restored the balance. In terms of nuclear power and what this means, this almost kind of still gives off Cold War vibes. Like, which power is good, which one kind of triumphs over the other one.
Yeah, there is definitely still a lot of debate with whether or not nuclear power is good or bad with this one. This movie is a lot less, like, in your face that these are nuclear monsters like it is in the other movies. They just don't really, like, play into it quite as much. So in this movie, it's a lot less, like, this monster is a metaphor for nuclear war. Well, like, that's definitely the case still. It's just a lot less obvious and a lot less, like, in your face about it.
Yeah. Godzilla, they still kind of make him more of a nuclear weapon than, like, the rest of them. Because they still talk about him, you know, like, when he was supercharged, they were like, oh, he's going to go off like a nuke. Yeah. They have to feed him nukes. Nuclear power was still very prevalent in the film.
Yeah, still prevalent, but not so much equating the creatures themselves to nuclear weapons as much as the other ones.
There was still extreme amounts of destruction, which, like, obviously can still be tied back to nuclear weapons and what they could do. This more on a worldwide scale then. It wasn't too, like, this is a nuclear weapon.
Yeah. And a little bit, it was almost like a little bit less military propaganda-y. Like, it was certainly still there. Yeah, because every U.S.-based action movie is.
It was, I mean, because it was more focused on the Monarch organization, and they kind of had their own military personnel that were helping them, and they were working with the U.S. military. Yeah. So there was still military action taking place, but our main character in the 2014 film was an EOD officer in the Navy.
Yeah, versus the second film is not that.
Yeah, the second film...
It's about Monarch more than...
It's about Monarch. It has more family ties and relations to it. It's also... It more just hits back to the original 1954 film with Dr. Serizawa. It's not super focused on the military because at this point the military can do little to nothing.
Yeah, like they used their oxygen destroyer.
Didn't work.
It didn't work. And that was pretty much like the biggest weapon that they had.
Yeah. It was basically it was Godzilla. It was how they could help Godzilla.
Help them.
Yes. I mean, he did. It just happened to be Dr. Serizawa, the only Japanese character that was in this film.
Yeah, there's also that.
Yeah, he's Dr. Serizawa in both the 2014 film and the 2019 film is the only main lead Japanese character that we have.
Yeah, that's disappointing but not surprising.
And he was fairly listened to in a couple of the films, but he was still kind of regarded as a kind of a crazy scientist.
Yeah, like they didn't the military did not want to listen to him.
No, they're like, well, we'd rather blow things up.
We'd rather just kill it.
Yeah,
let's not listening to the fact that you can't just kill it.
Right. This film, they kind of listen to him a bit more, but they also kind of have to like not work straight up alongside the U.S. the military. But also in this film, the military was really trying to work on evacuation and like helping with like damage control in other parts that the Titans were like stomping around. This film really focused on a small, tight-knit team that were working together to help Godzilla help them defeat the Ghidorah and the eco-terrorists. The eco-terrorists, by the way, at the end of this film, kind of bought Ghidorah's severed head.
Yeah, that was weird. So Godzilla, if you remember, we mentioned, he ripped off one of Ghidorah's heads. And someone found it and sold it to the eco-terrorists.
Yeah.
What are they going to do with it? We don't know.
The ending very much gave off also like...
Sequel?
Sequel vibes, also fallout of nuclear weapon, because the person that sold it to the eco-terrorists, which were the same ones that Dr. Emma Russell was working with, sold it to him, but he was telling him that, like, when we were walking through this, like, fishing isn't good because all the stuff in the sea are dead. That could be connected to the oxygen destroyer because of how large it was. It killed a lot of marine life.
Because there was a little scene after the oxygen destroyer was used that it didn't kill the Titans, but there was a little, like, splash of all the dead fish popping up.
Yeah, so, like, fishing ain't very good. But yeah.
Yeah, that was the 8 hours of Godzilla.
That was our 8 hours of Godzilla brain melding.
Seeing in my mind, seeing the difference between the U.S. movies and the Japanese movies was, like, the biggest thing that made watching them all back to back really interesting.
Yeah, especially in chronological order, too. Because around the time of the 2016 film, the Shin Godzilla, still to this day, there's, like, missile testing, nuclear tests, all the time. In this specific time, 2016, 2017, North Korea was shooting missiles over Japan into a specific part of the sea. And Japan was freaking out. Yeah. Because obviously, like, that trauma that they had.
That bad.
Yeah, that bad. And so they were freaking out. During this time, there's a lot of, like, people trying to sell fallout shelters and, like, specific, like, ready-made gear, things like that. And there's also a lot of nuclear bomb testing drills that are happening in Japan. There's videos of school children learning what to do in the event that a nuclear weapon just happened to be shot off from wherever.
Yeah, so seeing these in chronological order really did also show what was going on at those times.
And it made it even more understandable why Shin Godzilla was more destructible, because our evolution, our technology of weapons has increased dramatically. Right now we have some of the strongest weapons probably in the world than we ever had. So it makes sense that Godzilla is increasingly getting stronger. And not only stronger, he's gotten larger.
He's gotten larger. I also would argue that he's gotten more intelligent. In the very first movie, he's wandering around. He is wandering around, stomping on things, getting caught up in cable wires. But in the first movie, he is really just kind of a big thing, wandering around, smashing stuff. But slowly throughout the movies, I feel like he gets more and more, like, he has his own motives and his own character and stuff, showing that maybe as a creature he's gotten more intelligent.
Yeah, there's...
So bigger, more intelligent, and more powerful.
Yes. An artist posted a size chart that they had done of all of the Godzilla monster movies. We didn't watch all the Godzilla movies.
There's so many of them, if you didn't know.
There's so many.
We would need another 8 hours.
I feel like I need, like, 2 weeks. Because it just feels like that there's that many. But at the beginning points of Godzilla's creation, the first film, he was 50 meters tall. I will do a quick conversion for everybody for 50 meters into feet. 164 feet tall.
164 in freedom units.
So Godzilla's, he's tall. In the first one, the 1954 film, he's fairly tall. However, getting into the later films, Godzilla in the 2014 version, he is 108 meters tall, which is then 354 feet tall.
Yeah, so he almost doubles in size.
Almost doubles in size for 2014. 2016 is where it gets a bit harder because he has all those evolutions.
We're what is he in 2019?
I'm gonna do his last final form in 2016 because we do have that.
I guess that is where he's the most similar to the others.
In 2016, he is 118.5 meters tall, which is then 388 feet tall.
So a little bit taller.
Just a little bit taller. But the 2019 film doesn't get too much taller than that, with a whopping 119 meters tall. So, and his final Godzilla in 2019 is 390 feet tall.
Almost 400 feet.
Almost 400 feet. Compared to our now baby-looking 1950...
Our little baby Godzilla.
A little baby Godzilla in 1954 at like, what, 180 feet
160.
tall? 168 feet tall?
Yeah, so we go from 160 to almost 400 feet tall throughout these movies.
I think that also is a huge representative of just the overarching notion that nuclear power is so incredibly...
Yeah, it's almost like he's getting bigger as nuclear power is getting more powerful.
Yes. A direct correlation. Interesting. Okay, so for final comparisons, we agree that when looking at Japan and Japan's own views of Godzilla evolving from the 1954 to 2016, 1954, he's angry. He's stomping.
He angy.
2016, he angy.
He angrier.
He's so angry. And he is more destructive, has those like weird lasers coming out of his back. He's more threatening.
Yeah, so in the Japanese media, he gets more threatening and more angry.
And that makes sense as time goes on, because like Japan has been the country that's been most impacted by nuclear war in terms of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
For sure.
And then that 2016-2017 time, while they were again fearing for their lives from North Korean missiles that were, you know, popping on over them, that makes sense that Godzilla is extremely angry. However, in the Western media, so the American Godzilla films, Godzilla starts out as an ally because there is a bigger threat towards everybody else. So nuclear power for good.
He gets more powerful in the next movies.
More powerful because there's more adversaries, more antagonists.
And becomes even more of an ally. So in the American films, if we're taking this really literal, nuclear weapons are good and become better.
Yes.
While in Japanese films, they are bad and become worse. And it's a very obvious distinction between the two.
Yes, but they both kind of, to some respect, flit along the line of, at what point would it be okay to use nuclear weapons?
Yeah. Or is it ever?
Yeah. Which is something that America did not consider when they nuked Japan in the first place.
No. The Japanese movies also feel like there is a little bit more of a debate in them about, especially with like Shin Godzilla, where it's a whole debate of like, do we nuke him or do we not? Yeah. Where it's like debating whether or not they have a place, nuclear weapons or not. There's much less of a debate in the U.S. movies.
Yeah, they kind of just
gloss over it a little bit more.
They gloss over it. They make it seem like using nuclear weapons in order to defeat the already nuclear weapons is good, also is needed. Like, it has to be done.
When we learn that that's maybe not the case.
Yeah. In terms of the last film, they did really make it sound like Godzilla needed the nuclear power to defeat. Yeah.
So U.S. films, it's good and it's powerful, and it's the only thing that can save you.
Yeah, but at what cost?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's like the main differences between the movies. For sure. Makes sense with the perspectives that, you know, Japanese people have versus the U.S. government has.
Yeah. And still today, nuclear power is still very prevalent.
But nuclear power is not something that's, like, going away anytime soon.
No, we will have it
for
a very long time. It will be
a thing. It'll be a controversy. It'll be a problem for a very long time.
Well, thank you, Julia. This has been a fun time talking about our 8-hour binge session of Godzilla.
Thanks for involving me. It was very interesting, very fun.
Yeah, you definitely brought some really good perspectives.
Thank you.
On the films. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me. And I will see everybody else in our next and final installment of Oh My God-zilla.
See ya.